Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've always believed in investing in education. After building my software company from scratch and selling it for a comfortable sum 15 years ago, I made it my mission to help my family's younger generation succeed. Every niece, nephew, grandniece, and grandnephew who showed dedication to their studies got my support. That was my way of giving back to the family that stood by me during my startup's tough early days. My latest investment is my grandniece, a brilliant young woman studying computer engineering. She reminds me of myself at that age, driven, sharp as a tack, and determined to make something of herself. When she made it into a prestigious university program, I didn't hesitate to make her the same offer I'd made to all the others: maintain excellent grades, stay out of trouble, and I'd handle 90% or more of her student debt, plus help with expenses. Last week she was passing through our small town between home and college, so I met her at the local sandwich shop convenience store for lunch. She'd just aced her midterms and was on track for the dean's list again, so I wanted to treat her to lunch and fill up her tank. Just a small reward for her hard work. We were having a great time catching up over sandwiches, discussing her latest projects and her plans for an internship next summer. I noticed a group of 4 middle-aged women at a nearby table giving us odd looks, but I didn't think much of it at first. My grandniece checked her watch and realized she needed to get going to make it back for her evening study group. She thanked me profusely for lunch, calling me the best great-uncle ever. After giving me a quick hug and a peck on the cheek, she told me she loved me and promised to call when she got back to campus. I told her to drive safely and asked her to let me know when she made it home. She headed out to fill her tank while I waited at the counter to pay once she finished. That's when things went completely sideways. The group of women who'd been staring at us suddenly surrounded me at the counter. The apparent ringleader, a woman with the most stereotypical Karen haircut I'd ever seen, started screaming accusations at me, calling me a disgusting pedo. When I asked her what she meant, another woman threatened to call the police, accusing me of human trafficking in broad daylight. I tried to explain that she was my grandniece and we were just having lunch, but Karen declared that made it even worse, labeling me an incestuous pedo. I quickly realized there was no point arguing with these women. They'd made up their minds about what they'd seen and nothing was going to change that. But when I tried to leave, they physically blocked the door, shouting that they wouldn't let me escape. The poor convenience store clerk, looking absolutely terrified, called the police. The women refused to call themselves, which should have been their first clue they were in the wrong. But self-awareness clearly wasn't their strong suit. It took about 25 minutes for the first officer to arrive, and the women immediately swarmed him, all talking at once about how they caught a predator. 2 more officers had to show up before I could even give my statement. I called my grandniece, who spoke to the officers and confirmed everything. Even after the police verified my story, these women wouldn't back down. They kept blocking the door, insisting they were protecting the community. It took an officer threatening to arrest them before they finally let me leave. Almost an hour after this whole circus started, one of the officers suggested I file a complaint for unlawful detainment, which I did. 3 days later, I got a call from the police department. Turns out the convenience store's security cameras had captured the entire incident, including the women physically preventing me from leaving. The store owner had also filed a complaint about their behavior disrupting his business. The 4 women were charged with unlawful detainment and disorderly conduct. But the real karma came when the local newspaper picked up the story. Apparently, Karen was running for city council, campaigning on a family values platform. The security footage of her screaming unfounded accusations and physically blocking an innocent person from leaving a store went viral in our small community. She withdrew from the race a week later, and I heard 2 of the other women were asked to step down from their positions on the Parent-Teacher Association board. My grandniece found the whole thing hilarious once she knew I was okay. She even sent me a t-shirt that says, "World's Most Suspicious Great-Uncle for Christmas," We still meet for lunch when she passes through town, but now we get takeout. I've been a software contractor for over a decade, and I've seen my fair share of entitled managers. But this one takes the cake. Let me tell you about the time I maliciously complied with a manager's demands and watched it spectacularly backfire on him. I was working on this massive software project with about 30 other developers. The pay was great, especially with overtime, which they were practically throwing at us. I had settled into a routine of working 12-hour days during the week, which left my weekends free for my real passion, racing. I pack up my trailer and head out of state most weekends to compete. Everything was going smoothly until my project manager started making mandatory weekend work a regular thing. Every Thursday, like clockwork, he would gather everyone and announce that we needed to come in for 8 hours on Saturday and 4 hours on Sunday. Most people would end up with around 52 hours total for the week. I was already pushing 60 hours during weekdays, and I had my races planned months in advance. The first couple of times I explained my situation, they made an exception. Then the tone changed. The project manager started complaining that I wasn't being a team player, pointing out that everyone else was putting in the weekend hours. When I reminded him that I was already working 60 hours during the week, more than anyone else, he dismissed it as my choice and insisted they needed people there on weekends. That's when I asked for clarification. I wanted to know if working 12 hours anytime between Friday evening and Monday morning would meet the requirement. When the project manager confirmed it would, I knew exactly what I was going to do. So here's what I did. I left the office at 9 p.m. on Friday, already having knocked out 4 of the required 12 weekend hours. Saturday morning I headed out for my race as planned. After it was over, instead of going home, I drove straight to the office, trailer and all, at 3 a.m. Sunday morning. Just badging in seemed too simple, so I went the extra mile. I sent an email to the entire team for every single task I completed. I grabbed unassigned tasks from the whiteboard, sending an email each time I took one and another when I finished it. By 11 a.m. Sunday, I had my full hours logged and more work done than most people would accomplish in 2 regular days. The project manager was furious, telling me this wasn't what they meant by weekend hours. I simply reminded him that I had worked 12 hours between Friday evening and Monday morning, exactly as agreed. 2 weeks later, I was called into a meeting where the project manager told me they were terminating my contract due to my abrasive personality, claiming it was requested by the business team. Here's where it gets interesting. There was only one business team member I worked with, and when I mentioned to her that I was leaving because the business team wanted me gone, she looked shocked and denied it completely. She stormed off and apparently she raised hell up the management chain. Soon human resources and other managers were approaching me, offering to fight the termination if I wanted to stay. I told them I had already accepted another offer. The project manager was forced to eat humble pie. He had to ask me if I could extend my notice period to train others on my techniques. When I pointed out that they wanted my productivity but not me, he actually agreed. I declined, telling him I was already scheduled to start a new position. The aftermath was beautiful. During my notice period, 12 other developers quit. The general sentiment was that if they could cut me, someone working 60-hour weeks and delivering results, they could cut anyone. The project started falling apart. On my last day, I stayed late to finish my section of the software. The project manager's boss caught me on my way out and asked to talk. When I explained that I was staying late to ensure everything was working perfectly before I left, I also mentioned that my section was complete and tested, while another section with 6 people working on it still wasn't done. 2 months later, the project manager and his 3 contractor buddies were cut from the project. Turns out, as a contractor himself, he never had the authority to terminate my contract. He had used an employee friend to do his dirty work, and that person was also removed from the project. They reached out to ask if I'd come back, but I declined. My new manager actually appreciates my abrasive personality. Funny how being direct and getting things done is only abrasive to those who can't handle competence. I heard the project was still struggling to recover from losing so many developers. I'm a college student working as a cashier at our local store. It's not just any store, it's the heart of our small town, where everyone knows each other. I grew up here, and most customers are like extended family. The job helps pay for my classes, and I genuinely enjoy chatting with folks while ringing up their purchases. Everything was normal until last week when this out-of-towner showed up. The moment she walked in, I could tell she wasn't from around here. There's something about city folks that stands out in our quiet community. But this woman, let's call her Karen, she was a whole different breed of trouble. She burst through the door like she owned the place, nose wrinkled in disgust as she looked around our modest store. Right away, she started complaining about how disorganized the store was and how she couldn't find anything. I tried to be helpful and asked if she needed help finding something specific, but she just snapped back at me, complaining that no one ever helps her and that she was too busy. The way she said it made me feel like I was somehow bothering her by offering help. I decided to just point out where things were and let her shop in peace. But peace wasn't in Karen's vocabulary. When she finally came to my register, the real show began. She immediately started complaining about the prices, demanding to know if I could do something about them. I politely explained that the prices were set by store management and asked if there was anything else I could help with. She just curtly told me to give her the total. When I started bagging her items, she wasn't done yet. She tried demanding a discount, claiming she shopped here a lot. I had to explain our store policy about discounts only being available during promotions or sales and offered her our loyalty card program instead. She responded with a sarcastic comment about how she should get a discount just for being a good customer. Her voice dripped with sarcasm and I could see other customers starting to stare. Some of them were regulars who'd known me since I was a kid, and I could tell they were getting uncomfortable with how she was treating me. When I finished bagging her items and handed her the receipt, she snatched them from my hands. I thought it was finally over, but then she turned back. She threatened me, calling me an unprofessional little girl and saying I would regret this. She actually tried to lunge at me over the counter, but thankfully, the store owner was nearby. He's this tough old guy who's owned the place for decades. He immediately stepped in, ordering her to leave the store and warning her that physical violence wouldn't be tolerated. Instead of leaving quietly, Karen went berserk. She started knocking items off the shelves, throwing things around and screaming like a banshee. That's when the store owner reached under the counter and pulled out his rifle. In our town, most folks own guns, and nobody bats an eye, but seeing him pointed at Karen was shocking. He sternly ordered her to stop and leave the store, threatening to call the sheriff. Karen froze for a second, then bolted for the door. Talk about perfect timing. She ran straight into our town sheriff, who was walking in to get his usual coffee and newspaper. She immediately started crying to him, claiming that the store owner had tried to shoot her for no reason. The sheriff, who I've known since I was in diapers, just stood there calmly, asking her to settle down so he could hear both sides of the story. Karen kept ranting about how she was just trying to shop when the crazy store owner started yelling and pointing a gun at her for no reason. When the sheriff turned to the store owner for his side, he explained how Karen had been aggressive and was vandalizing the store. He described how he had to ask her to leave, and when she refused, he needed to pull out his rifle to protect his property and employees, including me. The sheriff took statements from everyone, including the regular customers who'd witnessed everything. The security cameras caught it all too. The sheriff ended up arresting her on multiple charges: attempted assault, vandalism, disorderly conduct, and violation of her bail conditions. She is facing serious jail time since this wasn't her first rodeo. The store owner later told me that the security footage of Karen's face when he pulled out the rifle has become a favorite among the local deputies. They say they've never seen someone switch from entitled rage to absolute terror so quickly. I worked in the telecommunications industry for 8 years, starting as a customer service representative and gradually moving up to a team leader. After all that hard work, I finally got my dream job, managing a back-office process team for a major European telecom company's shared service center in India. My team of 15 people worked around the clock, handling new SIM card activations. We'd receive Excel sheets filled with new customer information, and we'd manually activate each SIM card after running through a checklist of requirements. The process was tedious, time-consuming, and prone to human error. One night while working late, I had an idea. With my background in basic programming and Excel macros from my previous role, I thought we could automate most of the process. I spent weeks working on it, during my free time testing and refining the automation until it worked perfectly. When we finally implemented it, it automated about 85 to 90% of our work. My stakeholder from Europe was thrilled with the results. He enthusiastically asked about the time savings from the new system. I explained that we had reduced processing time by 80% and nearly eliminated errors. When he asked about the team members, I told him we could redeploy 12 of them to other departments where they were needed more. The next few months were smooth sailing. Our productivity was at an all-time high and customer satisfaction scores were exceptional. Then everything changed when our new compliance head arrived. During his induction, I proudly showed him our automated process, expecting praise. Instead, his face turned sour. He immediately questioned who had authorized the automation. When I explained that I had developed it myself to improve efficiency, he became angry. He declared it completely non-compliant and demanded we shut it down immediately. I tried to argue that it had been working perfectly for months, but he didn't care. He insisted we shut it down right away and submit a formal request to information technology, calling it a serious breach of protocol. It was a Friday afternoon when we had to revert to the manual process. I knew it would be a disaster, but I had no choice. That weekend was absolute chaos. Customer complaints flooded in, and our service levels plummeted. New customers couldn't use their SIM cards, and our small remaining team was overwhelmed. By Monday morning, my European stakeholder was furious. He demanded to know what had happened over the weekend, mentioning the hundreds of complaints they'd received. I explained the situation, and while he was supportive, he was clearly frustrated. Meanwhile, the compliance head was busy covering his tracks, claiming this was exactly why they needed proper protocols and that our unauthorized automation had been a ticking time bomb. When information technology finally got back to us, their proposal was shocking. The IT representative told us they could build a proper robotic process automation solution in about a month, but it would cost approximately £20,000. My stakeholder was livid when he heard this, questioning why we should pay £20,000 for something we already had for free. The situation kept getting worse. Our reputation was damaged, and within a year my stakeholder decided to move the entire process to a third-party vendor who promised to provide the same automation at no extra cost. While my team members were redeployed within the company, the offshore unit lost the £1 million annual revenue from our process. I saw an opportunity and accepted a position with a third-party vendor where our process was moving. On my last day, I sent a company-wide email explaining how a single person's rigid adherence to protocol without considering business impact had cost the company £1 million in annual revenue, damaged our reputation with a major client, and resulted in the loss of a successful process. I pointed out that sometimes innovation doesn't need to come with a hefty price tag or lengthy approval processes. It just needs common sense. The email caused quite a stir, and the compliance head was called into several meetings with senior management. 3 months after I left, my former colleague sent me a message with some satisfying news. They told me that the compliance head had finally been fired. Apparently, after our process moved, he had done the same thing to 3 other departments, costing the company several major contracts. The final straw came when he shut down another team's automation and caused a service outage for an entire region. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.